Look at her, Elena Val. Who does she think she is wearing that? The poor thing. Someone should inform her of the latest fashions.
In the Grand Kingdom of Velmora, status meant everything. The higher your title, the more valuable your life became. Dukes dined beneath crystal chandeliers. Countesses wore diamonds worth entire villages. Royal heirs were treated like gods walking among ordinary people. And those born without beauty, talent, or influence were treated as invisible. Among those forgotten people was Elena Vale, the girl everyone called useless. By the age of 22, Elena had become the kingdom's favorite disappointment. Noble daughters spent years mastering elegant dances, piano recitals, royal etiquette, and magical arts. But Elena struggled with all of it. During dance lessons, she often missed steps. During piano practice, her fingers trembled from anxiety. During noble gatherings, her quiet personality made people overlook her completely. Worst of all, she came from a family obsessed with perfection. Her older sister Clara was everything society admired. Beautiful, charismatic, graceful. Men followed Clara everywhere she went. Noble women praised her endlessly. Even the queen once called Clara the jewel of Velmora. And standing beside someone like Clara made Elena look even smaller. "Why can't you behave like your sister?" her mother constantly asked. "At least try not to embarrass this family," her father would coldly add. Those words slowly destroyed Elena from the inside. But despite everything, Elena remained kind. While noble ladies spent mornings choosing expensive dresses, Elena secretly visited orphan shelters outside the capital. While aristocrats mocked commoners, Elena spent hours helping elderly villagers carry water baskets through muddy roads. She repaired damaged books at the public library because poor children couldn't afford replacements. She quietly paid for medicine whenever she could, but nobody noticed those things, because kindness meant nothing in a kingdom obsessed with status. One winter evening, the Ashford family hosted the largest engagement banquet of the year. Nobles from every region arrived in luxurious carriages. Crystal lights illuminated the enormous ballroom. Musicians played softly while servants carried silver trays through crowds of laughing aristocrats. Elena never wanted to attend. She already knew how the night would end, with humiliation. But her mother insisted, "At least stand quietly and try not to ruin Clara's chances with important men." Elena lowered her eyes silently. "Yes, mother." When they arrived, Clara immediately became the center of attention. Men surrounded her within seconds. Compliments followed her everywhere. "Lady Clara looks breathtaking tonight. Surely a prince will marry her one day. No woman in Velmora compares to her." Meanwhile, Elena stood alone near the marble staircase wearing a simple pale blue gown she had repaired herself 3 different times. Compared to the glittering diamonds around her, she looked painfully ordinary. Groups of noble women glanced at her and laughed quietly behind decorative fans. Is that really Clara's sister? Poor family. One daughter shines like royalty while the other looks like a maid. Elena pretended not to hear them. She kept her head lowered, fingers tightening nervously against her dress. She only needed to survive the evening. But fate had other plans. As she carefully stepped away from the crowd, a servant suddenly collided with her. Red wine exploded across the front of her gown. Gasps echoed through the ballroom before cruel laughter quickly followed. "Oh no!" one noblewoman mocked dramatically. "What a disaster. That dress was already hopeless before the wine. Perhaps she should leave before embarrassing herself further." Elena froze completely. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. The red stain spread across the faded fabric while hundreds of eyes stared directly at her. Lady Beatrice Ashmore slowly approached with a cruel smile. "Honestly, Elena," she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you should know your place. By now, banquets like this are for people of importance." More laughter erupted around the room. Elena's vision blurred slightly. She wanted to disappear, run away, hide somewhere nobody could see her. But before she could move, a deep voice suddenly echoed across the ballroom. "That is enough." The room instantly fell silent. Every noble turned toward the entrance. And then they saw him, Duke Alexander Ashford, the most powerful man in Velmora after the royal family itself. Cold, untouchable, feared by nobles and ministers alike. Alexander rarely attended public gatherings for long. He despised meaningless conversations and fake aristocratic behavior. Rumors described him as ruthless in business and merciless in politics. Men feared disappointing him. Women dreamed of earning a single glance from him. Yet despite the dozens of important nobles around him, his eyes focused only on Elena. The ballroom became so silent that even the musicians stopped playing. Alexander slowly walked across the marble floor toward her. Calm, controlled, dangerous. Noblemen immediately stepped aside. Nobody dared block his path. Elena's heartbeat pounded violently in her chest. Why was he walking toward her? When Alexander finally stopped before her, he noticed the wine soaking through her dress and the tears she was desperately trying to hide. His expression darkened instantly. Without hesitation, the Duke removed his expensive black coat and gently placed it over Elena's shoulders himself. Gasps spread across the ballroom. A Duke touching a disgraced girl in public was already shocking enough. But what happened next stunned the kingdom even more. Alexander took a silk handkerchief from his pocket and personally cleaned the wine stain from Elena's trembling hands. Servants nearby looked horrified. Nobles stared in disbelief. A man of his status should never perform such a task himself. But Alexander ignored every shocked face around him. His voice softened slightly as he looked at Elena. "Did anyone hurt you?" Elena could barely breathe. No nobleman had ever spoken to her so gently before. She quickly shook her head, but Alexander already understood the truth. He slowly turned toward the crowd. His cold gaze swept across the nobles like a blade. "If any of you mock her again," his voice became terrifyingly calm, "you answer to me personally." Fear spread instantly through the ballroom. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Even Lady Beatrice stepped back nervously. But Alexander wasn't finished. He suddenly extended his hand toward Elena. "Dance with me." The entire ballroom nearly stopped breathing. Elena stared at him in complete shock. "Why, Your Grace? I don't dance very well." "Then follow my lead." Before anyone could react, the Duke himself guided the mocked, useless girl onto the center of the ballroom floor. Noble women watched with jealousy. Ministers whispered in confusion. Clara's expression darkened with disbelief. And under the glow of golden chandeliers, the most powerful Duke in the kingdom danced slowly with the one girl everyone had humiliated moments earlier. Alexander's hand rested carefully against Elena's waist. Not possessive, protective. For the first time that night, Elena stopped trembling. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered softly. Alexander looked down at her quietly. Because nobody else did. And in that single moment, something inside Elena's broken heart began to change forever. The ballroom remained frozen long after the dance ended. Nobles whispered behind trembling hands. Ministers exchanged confused glances. Even the musicians looked terrified to continue playing, because what they had just witnessed made absolutely no sense. Duke Alexander Ashford, the coldest nobleman in the kingdom, had publicly defended a girl society considered worthless. Worse, he had danced with her. Personally. And in Velmora, a single dance from a duke could destroy reputations or create them overnight. Elena could still feel the warmth of Alexander's hand against hers as the music faded. Her heart refused to calm down. This couldn't be real. Men like Alexander Ashford didn't notice girls like her. They certainly didn't protect them. Yet before she could even process what happened, Alexander turned toward the crowd again. "The banquet will continue," he announced coldly. "And anyone caught spreading rumors about Lady Elena tonight will leave this estate immediately." Silence swallowed the ballroom. Nobody dared challenge him. Alexander then looked back at Elena. "Come with me." The words were simple, but the entire room reacted like lightning had struck the palace. Clara's face immediately tightened with jealousy. Lady Beatrice looked horrified. Several noble women whispered frantically. "He's taking her away personally? What is happening? Since when does the Duke escort women himself?" Elena hesitated nervously. "Your Grace, people are staring." "Let them stare." His answer came instantly. Then, without waiting for permission, Alexander gently guided Elena away from the ballroom himself. Not through the servant corridors, not through the side halls used for disgraced guests, but through the grand royal corridor reserved only for high-ranking nobles. The message was painfully clear. He was treating her as someone important. Elena noticed servants bowing deeply as they passed. Guards opened doors instantly. Even palace officials lowered their heads respectfully toward Alexander. But what shocked her most was the way he slowed his steps slightly whenever she struggled to keep up in heels. A duke adjusting his pace for someone beneath nobility was unheard of. "You don't need to do this," Elena whispered quietly once they reached the quieter palace gardens. Snow drifted softly from the night sky. Lanterns glowed along frozen stone paths. Alexander stopped walking. "Do what? Protect me." His eyes darkened slightly. "Who said I was protecting you?" Elena blinked in confusion. Alexander looked away briefly before speaking again. "I simply dislike cruelty." But Elena knew that wasn't entirely true. He could have stopped the humiliation with a single command from across the ballroom. Instead, he walked directly toward her himself. He gave her his coat himself. He danced with her himself. No nobleman ever lowered himself that way, especially not a duke. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Snowflakes landed softly against Elena's dark hair. Then suddenly, Alexander removed one of his gloves and reached toward her face. Elena froze completely. His fingers brushed gently beneath her eye, wiping away the tear she hadn't realized was still there. "You cry quietly," he murmured. Her breath caught instantly. Nobody had ever noticed something so small before. Elena quickly stepped back nervously. "I should return inside." But Alexander's next words stopped her immediately. "Why do you allow them to treat you that way?" Elena lowered her eyes. "Because they're right." Alexander's expression hardened instantly. No, his voice became dangerously firm. "They are not." Elena looked up slowly. Alexander stepped closer. "You think worth is measured by talent, titles, beauty, or wealth, because that is all this kingdom values." His gaze softened slightly. "But I have met women with perfect elegance and empty hearts." He paused. "You are different." Elena's chest tightened painfully. Nobody had ever defended her like this before. But before she could respond, distant voices suddenly echoed from the palace entrance. Several young noblemen approached the garden, laughing loudly. The moment they noticed Elena beside Alexander, they immediately looked uncomfortable. One of them forced an awkward smile. "Your Grace, we didn't realize you were entertaining company." Alexander's expression turned cold again instantly, and the noblemen exchanged nervous glances. One finally laughed weakly. "We were only surprised to see Lady Elena here." Usually he hesitated. "Usually girls like her aren't invited into private royal gardens." Elena immediately looked down in embarrassment. But Alexander's response came colder than winter itself. "Then perhaps girls like her should replace the women currently filling noble society." The men froze completely. Alexander slowly stepped in front of Elena protectively. "At least she possesses dignity." The insult landed like a slap. The nobleman immediately apologized before practically fleeing the garden. Elena stared at Alexander speechlessly. "You didn't have to embarrass them." "I wanted to." She blinked again. Alexander sighed quietly before looking toward the snowy sky. People become cruel when they believe nobody powerful will challenge them. Then his eyes returned to hers. "I will." Elena felt something dangerous awaken inside her chest. Safety, warmth, hope, emotions she had buried years ago. But deep down, she also felt fear, because the more kindness Alexander showed her, the more painful it would become if he ever disappeared from her life. Back inside the ballroom, rumors spread wildly. The Duke spent nearly half an hour alone with her. This is becoming scandalous. Could he actually like her? Clara sat silently gripping her wine glass so tightly it nearly cracked. For the first time in years, she was no longer the center of attention. Every conversation had become about Elena, and Clara hated it. Meanwhile, when Alexander finally escorted Elena back into the ballroom, something even more shocking happened. Instead of leaving her alone again, he pulled out a chair beside his own at the royal table. Gasps spread instantly. Only honored guests sat there. Ministers, generals, royal advisors, not forgotten girls with no status. Elena immediately shook her head nervously. "I can't sit there." Alexander looked at her calmly. "You can. People will talk. They already are." Several nobles watched in disbelief as the Duke himself poured Elena a glass of water before servants could even move. Another impossible breach of royal behavior. Dukes did not serve others. Others served them. But Alexander ignored every shocked stare in the room. Throughout dinner, he continued doing things no royal man was expected to do. When Elena accidentally dropped her fork from nervousness, Alexander picked it up before servants reached it. When she quietly mentioned being cold, he ordered the fireplace near her seat strengthened immediately. And when ministers repeatedly tried pulling him into political discussions, Alexander's attention always returned to Elena instead. "You repair books?" he asked softly during dinner. Elena nodded carefully. "Only damaged ones." "Why?" "Because stories shouldn't disappear just because they're broken." Alexander became strangely quiet after hearing that answer. For a moment, something vulnerable crossed his normally unreadable expression. Then he asked another question nobody expected from a man like him. "What kinds of stories do you like?" Elena looked genuinely surprised. "You want to know?" I asked. Slowly, nervously, Elena began speaking about the novels she loved. Adventure stories, tragic romances, tales about ordinary people finding happiness despite impossible odds. And the more she spoke, the quieter Alexander became. Because for the first time in years, someone around him sounded real. No manipulation, no greed, no fake admiration for his title. Just honesty, pure and simple. By the end of the evening, something dangerous had already begun growing inside the Duke's chest. Something he had not allowed himself to feel in a very long time. Attachment. And as Alexander watched Elena smile softly while speaking about books under the golden chandelier light, he realized one terrifying truth. He did not want this night to end. By sunrise, the entire kingdom of Velmora had become obsessed with Elena Vale. Noble women whispered her name during breakfast gatherings. Ministers discussed her quietly inside royal chambers. Even palace servants couldn't stop gossiping about the mysterious girl who somehow captured Duke Alexander Ashford's attention. But unlike everyone else, Elena wasn't excited. She was terrified, because for the first time in her life, people were noticing her. And attention in Velmora was dangerous, especially when powerful women began feeling threatened. The insults started immediately. The Duke is only entertaining himself. A girl like her could never survive noble society. Eventually he'll grow bored and throw her away. Elena tried ignoring the rumors. She truly did. But every cruel word slowly reopened old wounds she spent years trying to survive. That afternoon, she escaped to the one place where the world felt quieter, the Old Town Library. Dust floated through golden sunlight near towering bookshelves. The elderly librarian smiled warmly the moment she arrived. "You look troubled again, child." Elena forced a weak smile. "Do I?" Only people carrying heavy hearts smile that softly. Elena quietly returned to repairing damaged books in the corner near the windows. It calmed her. Broken things always made more sense to her than people did. Hours passed peacefully, until the entire library suddenly fell silent. Elena frowned slightly. Then she heard it. Heavy footsteps. Royal guards. The librarian immediately panicked. Why would palace guards come here? The doors slowly opened. Every person inside froze instantly, because walking into the tiny, dusty library was Duke Alexander Ashford himself. Gasps spread through the room. Nobles visited royal academies. They visited opera halls. They visited political courts. But no duke had ever stepped foot inside the poor district library before, especially not Alexander Ashford. The guards looked deeply uncomfortable, standing among old wooden shelves and worn-out floors. But Alexander ignored everything around him. His eyes searched the room until they landed directly on Elena. And the moment he saw her, the terrifying Duke's expression softened immediately. Elena's heartbeat stumbled. "Why, Your Grace?" Alexander slowly walked toward her while the entire library watched in disbelief. "You left yesterday without letting me explain." Elena lowered her eyes quickly. "There's nothing to explain." "There is." She forced herself to remain calm. "Lady Vivian is beautiful, powerful, noble. She belongs in your world." Alexander stopped directly in front of her. "And what world do you think you belong in?" Elena stayed silent, because deep down, she didn't think she belonged anywhere. Alexander noticed the sadness in her expression instantly. Then something unbelievable happened. Something so shocking that the librarian nearly dropped an entire stack of books. Duke Alexander Ashford slowly removed his gloves and sat beside Elena on the dusty wooden floor. Not a royal chair, not a polished table. The floor. A duke sitting on the floor beside a common girl had never happened in Velmora's history. Guards looked horrified. Library visitors stared openly. But Alexander didn't care. "Show me what you're repairing," he said calmly. Elena blinked rapidly. What? The book? Her hands trembled slightly as she showed him the damaged novel. Alexander carefully took it from her hands. You repair all these yourself? Mostly. Why? Elena looked down quietly. Because abandoned things deserve a second chance too. Silence. Dangerous silence. Alexander stared at her for several seconds longer than normal. Then slowly, the Duke rolled up the sleeves of his expensive black shirt. The entire library gasped again. Why, Your Grace? The librarian stammered nervously. Alexander ignored him completely. Then, in front of everyone, the most powerful Duke in the kingdom picked up glue, thread, and damaged pages, and began helping Elena repair old books beside her. Complete silence swallowed the room. Nobles did not perform labor. Dukes certainly did not repair ruined library books with their own hands. Yet Alexander worked beside Elena calmly, as if titles meant absolutely nothing to him. Elena stared at him in disbelief. You don't know how to repair books. Then teach me. Your hands will get dirty. Alexander looked directly into her eyes. I don't care. Her chest tightened painfully. No man had ever lowered himself this way for her before. Not for appearances. Not to impress others. There was no audience here worth gaining favor from. Yet Alexander stayed. One little boy studying nearby slowly approached nervously. Mister, aren't dukes supposed to be scary? Several guards looked ready to faint from terror, but Alexander answered calmly while continuing to repair pages. I'm still deciding. The little boy laughed instantly. Soon other children gathered nearby curiously, and before long, the impossible happened. Duke Alexander Ashford spent nearly 2 hours sitting on the library floor, helping children repair damaged books. Elena watched him quietly the entire time. The cold Duke everyone feared listened patiently when children spoke. He carried heavy book boxes for the elderly librarian himself. At one point, he even climbed a ladder personally to fix a leaking ceiling window while guards stared in horror below. No royal man had ever behaved this way before. Alexander Ashford was destroying centuries of noble expectations without caring who witnessed it. Eventually, evening sunlight faded through the library windows. The children slowly left. The librarian closed the doors quietly. And finally, only Elena and Alexander remained inside. Elena looked at him softly. Why are you doing all this? Alexander placed the repaired book down carefully. Because you matter. Her breath caught instantly. He continued quietly. You spend your life fixing broken things while everyone around you breaks you instead. Elena felt tears forming again. You barely know me. Alexander stepped closer slowly. I know enough. His voice lowered. I know you apologize too much. Another step closer. I know you hide your sadness so others won't worry. Another step. And I know this kingdom never deserved your kindness. Elena's heart pounded painfully against her chest. Then suddenly, Alexander did something no duke in Velmora's history had ever done before. He slowly lowered himself onto one knee before her. Elena froze completely. So did the guards. So did the librarian. A duke kneeling before a woman without royal blood was unthinkable, scandalous, impossible. But Alexander remained there calmly, looking up at her like she was the important one. Your Grace, Elena whispered shakily. Alexander held her trembling hand gently. I am tired of watching people make you feel small. His eyes never left hers. So hear me carefully, Elena Vale. His voice softened in a way nobody had ever heard before. If this kingdom refuses to see your worth, he pressed her hand carefully against his chest. Then I will spend the rest of my life reminding you myself. Tears rolled down Elena's face instantly. The librarian quietly wiped his own eyes nearby. Even several guards looked emotional. And somewhere beyond the library walls, rumors about Elena Vale were about to become far more dangerous. Because the cold Duke of Velmora was no longer hiding his feelings anymore. If you're enjoying this emotional Duke romance story so far, subscribe to Duke's Courtyard for more heartbreaking betrayals, powerful love stories, and unforgettable royal drama. And tell us in the comments, what would you do if the most powerful Duke in the kingdom suddenly chose you?
But Elena still didn't understand the dangerous truth hiding behind Alexander's kindness. Every time the Duke defended her, powerful enemies were watching. Every time he chose her publicly, noble families grew more furious behind closed doors. Because in Velmora, love was never stronger than status. and the idea of a duke truly falling for a girl everyone considered worthless was beginning to shake the entire kingdom. Meanwhile, whispers about Alexander's past were spreading rapidly through royal society. A woman long connected to the duke's future was about to return to the capital, a woman powerful enough to destroy Elena's fragile happiness overnight. And when Elena discovers the truth about Alexander's royal obligations, she will believe everything between them was nothing more than temporary pity. But what happens next changes Velmora forever, because instead of abandoning Elena to protect his reputation, the Duke will do something no nobleman in the kingdom has ever dared to do before, a decision so shocking it forces even the royal council to fear him. Stay with us, because the moment Alexander chooses Elena over power, titles, and noble blood will leave the entire kingdom speechless.
By the end of the week, the entire kingdom of Velmora had become divided over one woman, Elena Vale. Some people admired her quietly, others hated her openly, but one thing had become impossible to deny. Duke Alexander Ashford was completely serious about her, and that terrified noble society, because powerful men were allowed to entertain ordinary women in secret, but loving one publicly? That threatened the entire structure of aristocratic pride. Inside royal courts, ministers whispered endlessly, "The Duke is losing control. This obsession will destroy House Ashford. A future duchess cannot come from someone so insignificant." Even members of Alexander's own family began turning against him. But none of them realized something important. Alexander Ashford had spent his entire life obeying duty. For years, he sacrificed personal happiness to protect his family's political power. He attended endless royal meetings, accepted cold alliances, smiled through fake noble traditions he secretly despised. But Elena changed something inside him. For the first time in years, he wanted something for himself. And that made him dangerous. One stormy evening, Alexander entered the royal council chamber for the monthly gathering of Velmora's highest-ranking nobles. Massive chandeliers glowed above long marble tables. Dukes, counts, ministers, military commanders, every powerful man in the kingdom sat waiting. Tension filled the room immediately the moment Alexander arrived, because rumors had already spread that he intended to make an announcement. Alexander calmly removed his gloves and took his seat at the head of the chamber. "Let's begin." The elderly Duke Renwick spoke first. Before political matters, his eyes narrowed carefully. "We must address the scandal surrounding Lady Elena Vale." Silence spread instantly. Alexander's expression didn't change. Another nobleman leaned forward coldly. "The kingdom is becoming unstable because of these rumors. People are questioning your judgment. House Ashford cannot afford embarrassment." Alexander remained silent. But the colder he became, the more nervous the room felt. Then Duke Carlisle finally said the words everyone had been thinking. A woman like Elena Vale could never become a duchess. Several nobles nodded immediately. She lacked status, training, influence, value. Alexander slowly lifted his eyes toward them. And suddenly, the entire room felt terrifyingly small. "Value," he repeated quietly. Nobody answered. Duke Renwick sighed. "Alexander, this foolish attachment has gone far enough. You are one of the kingdom's strongest leaders. You cannot throw away your future for a pitiful girl nobody respects." Wrong answer. The air inside the chamber shifted instantly. Alexander stood slowly from his chair. Every nobleman stiffened immediately, because everyone in Velmora knew one terrifying truth. Alexander Ashford was calmest right before becoming dangerous. He stepped away from the table slowly. "Interesting." His voice remained soft, controlled. "All of you speak endlessly about status." Another step forward. "Titles." Another. "Bloodlines." His eyes darkened completely. "Yet not one of you possesses even half the humanity Elena Vale carries naturally." Silence. Heavy silence. One minister forced a nervous laugh. "Surely your grace exaggerates." Alexander turned toward him instantly. "Do I?" The minister immediately looked away. Alexander continued walking through the chamber. "Tell me something." His voice echoed against the marble walls. "How many of you have visited orphan shelters this year?" Nobody answered. "How many of you have personally fed hungry families?" Silence. "How many of you repair broken things instead of discarding them?" Several nobles shifted uncomfortably now. Alexander stopped beside the enormous royal table. Elena Vale gives kindness freely in a kingdom where kindness barely exists. His voice hardened. That alone makes her worth more than half the nobles sitting in this chamber. Anger exploded instantly around the room. This is absurd. You would insult noble blood for a common girl. You're blinded by emotion. But Alexander wasn't finished. Duke Carlisle slammed his hand against the table. If you continue this madness, the council may withdraw support from House Ashford entirely. Dangerous silence followed. Then slowly, Alexander smiled. But it wasn't warm. It was terrifying. Withdraw it. The room froze instantly. Carlisle blinked. What? Alexander stepped closer. You heard me. His voice became colder than ice. If your loyalty depends on controlling who I love, his eyes swept across every nobleman in the chamber. Then your loyalty was worthless to begin with. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because no duke had ever spoken to the royal council this way before. But Alexander went even further. He suddenly removed the Ashford family seal ring from his finger, the symbol of his political authority, and threw it onto the council table. Gasps exploded across the chamber. Your Grace, ministers shouted in panic. Alexander's voice thundered through the hall. I would abandon every title in this kingdom before abandoning her. Complete silence swallowed the room. Several older nobles looked genuinely shaken now. Because suddenly, this was no longer a scandal. This was war. Duke Renwick stood slowly. You would truly risk everything for that girl? Alexander answered instantly, without hesitation. Then came the moment nobody expected. Alexander walked toward the massive chamber doors and threw them open himself. Standing outside was Elena. Her eyes widened in shock. She clearly never intended to enter. She had only come to deliver documents from the Library Restoration Committee. But now dozens of powerful nobles were staring directly at her. Fear immediately filled her face. Alexander noticed instantly, and instead of allowing servants to escort her away, the Duke walked directly toward her himself. Then, before the entire royal council, Alexander held out his hand to Elena openly. Come here. Her hands trembled. Alexander, I shouldn't be here. But his gaze softened immediately. You belong wherever I choose to stand. Gasps spread across the chamber again. Slowly, nervously, Elena placed her hand in his. Alexander turned back toward the nobles while keeping her beside him protectively. Look at her carefully. Silence. This woman you call useless spends more time helping this kingdom than most nobles ever have. His voice lowered dangerously. And if any man here believes she is beneath him, Alexander stepped forward once more. Then I challenge him to prove himself better. Shock exploded across the chamber. A duke issuing open challenges to fellow nobles over a woman? Unheard of. But Alexander's eyes held no hesitation whatsoever. Any objections? Nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Because deep down, every man in that room understood the truth. Alexander Ashford wasn't defending Elena anymore. He was declaring war on anyone who tried taking her away from him. Elena stared at him speechlessly. Her chest ached painfully. Nobody had ever fought for her before. Not like this. Not against the entire world. Alexander leaned down slightly beside her and spoke softly enough that only she could hear. I told you already. His fingers tightened gently around hers. I will never let them make you feel small again. Elena felt tears burn her eyes instantly. And for the first time in her life, she finally believed him. If this moment gave you chills, subscribe to Duke's Courtyard for more emotional Duke romance stories, royal betrayals, powerful love confessions, and unforgettable endings. And comment below, would you risk your title and power for true love like Alexander did? The royal wedding of Duke Alexander Ashford and Elena Vale became the most anticipated event in Velmora's history. Not because kingdoms were celebrating love, but because half the nation still couldn't believe it was happening. For weeks, nobles tried everything to stop the marriage. Rumors spread through newspapers daily. The Ashford bloodline will be ruined. A useless girl manipulated the Duke. This wedding will become the kingdom's greatest embarrassment. But no matter how vicious the attacks became, Alexander never stepped away from Elena's side. If she attended charity events, he accompanied her personally. If nobles insulted her publicly, Alexander destroyed them with a single glance.
After years of humiliation, rejection, and loneliness, Elena was finally standing at the edge of the life she never believed she deserved. The same girl who once cried alone after being mocked at royal banquets was now moments away from becoming the Duchess of Ashford. But in Velmora, happiness never arrives without a final battle. Hidden among the wedding guests were nobles still desperate to destroy her future. Old enemies were waiting for the perfect moment to humiliate Elena one last time in front of the entire kingdom. And just when she begins believing the pain is finally over, the ceremony will descend into complete chaos. Secrets will explode inside the royal cathedral. Powerful families will openly challenge the marriage, and Elena's deepest insecurities will return stronger than ever. But what Alexander does next becomes the moment that changes everything forever. Because instead of protecting his title, the Duke will publicly risk his entire legacy for the woman everyone once called useless. And in front of nobles, ministers, royal guards, and the entire kingdom. Alexander Ashford will say words so powerful that even Elena's parents will finally realize how terribly they failed their own daughter all those years. Don't leave yet, because the final moment between Elena and the Duke is the scene Velmora would remember for generations.
And whenever Elena's confidence began breaking again, the Duke reminded her exactly who she was to him. The future Duchess of Ashford. Eventually, the wedding day finally arrived. The royal cathedral glittered beneath thousands of golden lights. Massive stained glass windows reflected colors across marble floors. Noble families filled every seat. Royal guards lined the walls. Outside, crowds gathered across the capital hoping to witness the ceremony. But inside one private preparation room, Elena sat quietly staring into the mirror with trembling hands. She looked beautiful, far beyond beautiful. Her wedding gown shimmered softly beneath candlelight, like falling snow. Diamonds rested carefully against her neck. Her dark hair flowed elegantly beneath a royal veil. Yet despite everything, fear still lived inside her eyes. Because deep down, part of Elena still remembered every cruel word ever spoken to her. Useless, unwanted, not enough. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she whispered softly. The door slowly opened. Elena immediately froze. Standing there were her parents. Her mother's eyes already looked red from crying. Her father couldn't even look directly at her at first. Silence filled the room painfully. Then slowly, Elena's mother stepped forward. "You look beautiful." Elena lowered her eyes quietly. "Thank you." Her father swallowed heavily before finally speaking. "Elena," his voice cracked slightly. "We came because there's something we need to say before the ceremony begins." Elena's heartbeat slowed painfully. For years, she waited for kindness from them. For years, she hoped they would finally see her worth. But she stopped expecting it long ago. Her mother suddenly burst into tears. "We failed you." Elena looked up in shock. Her mother's hands trembled violently. "All those years we made you feel unwanted." Tears streamed down her face now. "We praised Clara while ignoring your kindness. We criticized your heart because we were too blind to understand its value." Elena felt her own eyes burning instantly. Her father finally stepped forward too. The proud man who never apologized to anyone suddenly looked broken. "I spent years believing strength meant perfection." His voice shook heavily. "But the truth is," he looked directly at Elena for the first time in years, "you became the strongest person in this family." Silence. Emotional silence. Then slowly, Elena's father lowered his head. "I am sorry." Her mother followed immediately. "Please forgive us." Elena's lips trembled, because this was all she ever wanted as a child. Not status, not praise, just love, real love. Slowly, tears rolled down her cheeks as she stepped toward them. And for the first time in years, her parents embraced her tightly. No criticism, no comparisons, just regret and love. Outside the cathedral, the royal bells finally began ringing loudly across the kingdom. The ceremony was starting. Minutes later, the cathedral doors slowly opened. Every noble turned toward the entrance instantly. And then, Elena appeared. Gasps spread through the entire cathedral. Even the cruelest nobles couldn't deny how breathtaking she looked. But Alexander noticed none of them. The moment he saw Elena walking toward him, the powerful duke completely forgot the rest of the world existed. His eyes softened instantly, and for the first time in public, people saw genuine emotion on Alexander Ashford's face. Love. Pure, undeniable love. Elena slowly reached the altar. Her hands trembled slightly again. Alexander immediately noticed. Without caring about royal protocol, he gently took both her hands before the ceremony even began. A small act, but meaningful. His thumbs brushed softly against her trembling fingers. "You're safe," he whispered quietly. Elena nearly cried again. The priest finally began the ceremony. "We gather here today to witness the union between Duke Alexander Ashford and Elena Vale." Suddenly, the massive cathedral doors burst open loudly. Gasps echoed everywhere. Lady Vivian Beaumont entered furiously alongside several furious nobles. "This marriage cannot happen." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Vivian pointed directly at Elena with rage burning in her eyes. "She is beneath nobility. She has no value. She will destroy the Ashford legacy." Elena's face paled instantly. Old fears returned like poison flooding her chest. But before anyone else could speak, Alexander stepped in front of Elena protectively. And this time, the Duke's calmness disappeared completely. "Enough." His voice thundered across the cathedral so powerfully that silence crashed down instantly. Alexander slowly turned toward the nobles. "For months, all of you insulted this woman." Another step forward. "You mocked her kindness." Another. "You called her useless simply because she wasn't born into arrogance." His eyes became terrifyingly cold. "But hear me clearly today." He turned back toward Elena gently. Then, before the entire kingdom, Alexander lowered himself onto one knee again. Gasps exploded across the cathedral. Dukes did not kneel publicly, especially not twice. But Alexander never looked away from Elena. His voice softened completely. "This woman taught me more humanity than every royal court combined." Tears filled Elena's eyes instantly. Alexander continued quietly. "When I was cold, she gave me warmth. When I stopped trusting people, she gave me peace. And when this kingdom only cared about power, he held her trembling hand carefully against his heart. She reminded me what love feels like." Complete silence filled the cathedral. Even nobles who hated Elena looked emotional now. Then Alexander stood slowly and faced the crowd one final time. "So let the entire kingdom hear this clearly." His arm wrapped protectively around Elena's waist. "Elena Vale is not useless." His voice echoed through every corner of the cathedral. "She is my future." He looked down at her softly. "My home. And finally, my wife." Tears streamed freely down Elena's face as the priest completed the ceremony. Moments later, Alexander kissed her gently beneath the cathedral lights while the entire kingdom watched in stunned silence. Outside, thousands of people erupted into cheers as the cathedral bells rang across Velmora. The same girl society mocked for years had just become Duchess Elena Ashford. But the most beautiful moment came afterward. As Elena and Alexander walked down the cathedral steps together, her parents waited near the royal carriage. Her father's eyes filled with pride this time instead of disappointment. Her mother smiled through tears. And as Elena passed them, her mother whispered softly, "We were wrong about you." Elena smiled gently. "I know." Then Alexander helped his wife into the royal carriage himself, another task servants normally handled, before joining her inside. The carriage doors closed slowly, and as the kingdom bowed outside, Elena finally realized something. The world spent years convincing her she was worthless, but it only took one man truly seeing her to change her entire life forever. If you enjoyed this emotional royal love story, subscribe to Duke's Courtyard for more heartbreaking betrayals, powerful Duke romances, emotional endings, and unforgettable stories every week. And comment below, what was your favorite moment between Elena and Alexander?